is celebrating. Good morning. For those folks that are just jumping on the call, Donna is recapping an amazing weekend that they had in the Rio Grande Valley, where they provided over 5,000 vaccines and 2,000 microchips in a collaboration between her organization and many other municipalities in the area. This conversation came about from Ashley Rodriguez, who's also from Texas, who's doing an amazing job changing and really just elevating the work that's being done in Texas. And it was a peer-to-peer sort of celebration that was happening. But good morning, everyone. It is 8:01 a.m. Pacific Standard Time where I am located. My name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Pilot Director. I am so excited for this call today about removing adoption barriers to make sure that we can have positive outcomes and positive relationships with our community. But before we get started, we want to get to know each other a little bit. So we have invited folks that also signed up for the original presentation that you're going to hear from the panelists today. So we're probably going to have quite a few new faces on this call. So what we want to know, the question of the day is, where are you from and what do you like to do outside of work? Again, our question of the day is, where are you from and what do you do outside of work for fun? And I'm going to pick on someone. Cameron Moore, may I pick on you, please? Just tell folks where
you
you're
know
from.
What I like to do.
This is a ringer. That's why I know this is.
I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I like to pick up trash on the beach. It's so soothing and relaxing, and it's like a treasure hunt. You never know what you'll find.
Amazing, Cameron. I'm gonna pick on Sarah. Sarah, please let us know.
I was just furiously typing away there. So I'm originally from Dublin, Ireland, and I've just come back from there last week, so I'm all happy at the moment. And I love to go dragon boating on Lake Union at the weekends, so that's me.
Okay, so explain, did you say dragon boating? Is that what you said?
Dragon boating, yeah. It's a form of paddling. There's about 20 of us in the boat, all paddling in time to a drum beat at the front and a tiller at the back.
Amazing.
Lots of fun.
Love it. My guy Javier, talk to us about your coaching youth sports. What type of sports? And also give people a little bit of background about just your family heritage of getting into animal welfare. I think it's one of the coolest stories I've ever
heard. I'm from Los Angeles, California, and I like coaching youth sports. I've been coaching youth football, baseball, and cheer for at least 20 plus years now. And it's just good to, teach the kids some things, see them how they glow once they get what they're being taught, and then, being adults and, giving back to the community and things like that. It's fun.
I love it. And then Javier, would you mind sharing just about, you told me the story about your uncle, right? Getting into the work, and that's one of the reasons you're in the work. Would you mind sharing about that a bit?
Yeah, I have an uncle who was also in animal control. He's retired now. I have an older brother who's retired animal control officer, another older brother who was an animal control officer, but came over to the IT side. Pretty much all of us started off from the bottom as kennel attendants and worked our way up to the positions that we're in now, where my uncle retired as a manager.
That's amazing. Javier, what do you love about the work that you're doing, especially in working in such a diverse and large community like LA County?
Well, I mean, I love the changes that have happened throughout the years, being in the department 20 plus years from what it was back then to what it is now, how we're giving back to the community, helping them out, just like you're saying, taking away barriers from adoptions, helping people keep their pets. I mean, it's really, gratifying, and it's great to where before we were more enforcement and taking, these animals away, even from the homeless community, where now we're providing services and helping them keep their animals. Till today, I mean, I got a call where somebody keeps complaining about this homeless individual who we should be taking his dog away. And it's like, no, we're not. If anything, we're giving him food, giving him a crate, keep the animal.
I love it. Well, you are in good company, my friend, because we have quite a panel today that's going to be talking all about removing barriers today. But before we get into the tofu of this conversation, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to open this up for national updates. So if there's anybody from a national organization that would like something to share, this is the time.
Hey, Bobby, I can go first. Hey, Good morning, everyone. Kelly Clarity here from Maddie's Fund. Happy Monday. Yay. I have a couple of reminders for everyone. First, about our BIPOC-led operating support grant. That application window is still open. Y'all be sure to get your applications in. It closes on Thursday, March 31st. So we'll pop the link for that in the chat. And another reminder that every month, y'all know we give away grants to the listeners of this call. So we will pop the link in the chat for you all to enter to that giveaway too. We give away $5,000 every month. And every time you watch live or you watch the recording, you can enter to win. So looks like Irene has already popped those links in the chat, so I don't have to do anything, and I am done. Have a great day, y'all.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Yeah, as a reminder, folks, all you got to do is show up and you're in the running for up to $5,000 for your organization. There's a few winners on this call now, so highly encouraged. Fill that out. We normally announce that on the first call of the new month. So coming up pretty soon. Anyone else? All right, the amazing Abbie Moore. I'm going to just come to you as our lead facilitator today. And I know you have lots of amazing folks to introduce as well. So I'm going to get out of your way, toss the show over to you, and I'm about to get my popcorn as well.
Off to a great start, not unmuting myself. Thank you, Bobby. Do we have everybody here? So I'm going to introduce the people who spoke who started on the panel that we did on this subject last time. If you didn't have a chance to see it, we had some really great conversation. And in fact, we had so much engagement and so many people posting questions in the chat that we just didn't get to everything, which is why we're coming back to you for part two. I have noted a bunch of questions that were posed in the chat during the last session, and I will pose these questions to our panelists. I will also, Stephanie, I'm going to put you on the spot in a moment and ask you just to quickly sum up what open adoptions is or are. What is this concept? But I was thinking about it this morning, and all of us on this call, I think we can all agree that animals deserve love. All animals deserve a wonderful home, and they deserve love. I think where open adoptions gets really interesting is when we ask ourselves, do all people deserve the love of an animal? With few exceptions, of course. Do all people deserve to have the love of an animal? And is it our job to exclude people, or is it our job to educate people and help them to be the kind of pet parent that we want to see? And also, does our definition of a great pet parent, is that the definition of a great pet parent? So Stephanie is really an expert that I have relied on to educate myself about this space. So Stephanie, would you mind taking a few minutes and telling us what this is?
Sure. Well, thank you for that. And I'm certainly, I don't necessarily consider myself an expert, but although I am very passionate about breaking down barriers for adoption and promoting conversation-based adoption processes. In a nutshell, I think that open adoptions and conversation-based adoption processes are really about starting from a place of yes, embracing adopters and would-be adopters as people who want to share their lives with an animal and are coming to us with the best of intentions that we may have accidentally trained them to do, perhaps in ways that we don't want to see. But I feel like we've conditioned people to expect an interrogation. And so they come to us maybe prepared for some difficult conversations, or they feel like they have to prove themselves. But essentially, I think that if we can start looking at people as our partners in saving lives and in and accepting that most people can be excellent pet parents, they come wanting to love an animal, and that's really the most important thing that that we can give to these pets. I personally do believe that most, if not all, people deserve to have pets and deserve to have that love returned to them. And I think that our jobs in animal welfare and as placement partners is to find those matches for those people. And I'm also somebody that values people and the interactions that we have with people and sharing our compassion with people in our communities as much as we do with the animals in our care.
Thank you, Stephanie. I knew you would be super eloquent, and indeed you were. I was remiss in not introducing you. I'm sure everybody knows Stephanie. Stephanie Frommer is Senior Director of Operations at Humane Rescue Alliance. Also with us today, do we have Luis Quintanilla? Okay, Luis is Executive Director of Harlingen Humane in Texas. Did I say that right? Harlingen?
Close enough. Yeah, it's Humane Society for Harlingen.
Harlingen. We have Alisha Vianello, Program Director at Gateway Pet Guardians.
Hello.
Hello. We have Allison Cardona, who's formerly of LA County Animal Care and Control and is now at UC Davis Shelter Medicine Program. And we have, of course, Clare Callison, of our own American Pets Alive, Maddie's Director of National Pet Supply and Demand. So with that said, last time we really got into some of the generalities around open adoptions, and today we're going to get into some of the specific questions that were asked. The first one is, the first couple are very specific to how adoptions get approved. First question is, and I'll invite anybody on the panel to speak up and talk. Do open adoptions include some kind of visual home check?
No.
Agree.
Sorry, I'll take that. Yeah, definitely not. We don't practice that here. It's, for so many reasons we don't practice that here. It's not possible with our volume of pets. Even if we thought that was a good idea, there's no way that we could possibly do that. We couldn't execute that with our level of staffing and the level of animals that we have coming into our shelter every day, let alone all year. It's not practical. And not only that, we just, we think that's kind of counter to what open adoptions is all about and being a part of our community. We're not quite sure, what would the criteria even be? Well, your house isn't nice enough. You don't have enough square footage, that kind of judgmental stuff from the 1800s or from the 1980s of animal welfare just doesn't belong in a shelter that wants to save animals and serve the community. So we just don't do that. Not at all.
Anyone else want to add to that?
What he said, just across the board. And I guess I just want to say, I think whether it's open adoptions or barrier-free adoptions, like I kind of just want to get on here and be like, give people animals. Like they are going to get them anyway. So let's have them come to a shelter and let's be a resource. And, I would just push back on even a yard check because what's the point really? And I mean, maybe that's something that everybody needs to ask themselves and do some reflection and then look at what that means for the community. So just let people have animals. And there's a lot more that I could say and I will say, but I'll yield my time right now.
I would just add into, I think I've heard the counter to this is, well, people appreciate us coming in and, pointing out what's unsafe in their home, or ways that dogs can get out of yards, or, you know, hide those chemicals under the sink from the new puppy and things. But that, you know, that's our perspective, that they might enjoy that. But I think of, you know, someone coming into my home and pointing those out, you're just setting up this relationship based on lack of trust, and that I'm not capable enough to be able to, you know, pet proof my own home. You know, I think those resources and providing tips ahead of the time, you know, when you're doing the adoption is perfectly acceptable, but asking first, what do you want help with? And what is your experience level? How can I help you? And providing those resources versus physically going to someone's house, or even during COVID, I saw the FaceTiming, which I think is even more intrusive and less personal. So yeah, definitely echoing Allison, Louise, with a big no on that.
Claire, can you talk a little bit more about FaceTiming and why you find it intrusive?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always had, you know, a problem with the home check idea, but then during COVID, I saw this breakthrough of, well, we're using FaceTime now because we can't physically go into homes. And I think of, well, on the surface level, just the time that it's taking to have somebody go through their home with a phone while you're sort of inspecting, and it might be under the shield of we're providing support and safety. But again, if someone had me like turn on my camera and show my kitchen and my yard, I mean, just the feeling of that, I think that's what's missing, is like, let's put ourselves in adopters' shoes and see, would you like that into your home? You know, would your mom be welcome to that, or your best friend, you know, would sort of pull the audience and look at your family and see, is that a good way to set up a relationship? Will I be willing to go to that person for resources, feeling like I'm always sort of under this inspection lens? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't think that the home check has ever been super personal, but when now it's becoming a phone and virtual, I can see how that could go just really south. And again, just putting yourself in other people's shoes is so important.
So I love that you said putting ourselves in adopters' shoes, because I'm pretty sure that all of us, you know, all of us on this call have been in adopters' shoes before. You know, when I think about my first experience owning a dog, I mean, it was not ideal. Let's just say that I was living on a friend's couch. I had just left a horrible relationship. I had no money. I had no business having an animal, and yet I acquired one. And I made it work. And it would be really interesting to hear all the stories about, you know, from people on this call who have been in similar situations where, you know, we might not have been somebody that we would have approved, and yet we made it through. You know, we figured it out as we went. And I think that could be a whole other call. So there's some really interesting stuff happening in the chat about yards, and specifically, I find this topic really interesting of what happens if somebody tells you that their home is a certain way, and then when you check, you find that it's not. Can someone speak to that?
That's sort of what I alluded to when I said, you know, we've unintentionally trained adopters to come to us with perhaps by stretching the truth, or they feel like they have to prove themselves to us. And I think that's a function of the barriers that we've placed over the past 50 to 100 years in adoptions, that we still get people who email us with basically their pet owning resume to try to justify themselves to us before they've even set foot into our shelter. And I personally don't care if somebody has a fenced yard. You know, some of the most neglected animals live in a fenced yard and never like experience the world, and never even necessarily get brought inside and share time with the family. So I think that having some of these sort of arbitrary requirements that we think are providing the animal with benefits may have some unintended consequences down the road. and that really what we should be doing is engaging people in conversation to find out, what is your home like? What's your family like? What are you looking for in a pet? And how can we make the best match for you based on what you're able to provide, what your needs are, and how can we best support you?
Thank you. Here's an interesting question. Do you adopt to people who have previously surrendered a pet to you? Surrendered their own pet to you?
I can speak a little to this. I think this all comes back to matchmaking. So say someone surrendered a dog because it bit their child, but they want to have a dog, but obviously they have to keep their child safe. So then we would look for a dog who maybe has lived in a foster home with kids, or who maybe had a better temperament, was less fearful, to try that out. So we look at the reason why they surrendered and then try to make a better match for them. It's really rare that they surrender just because, I don't know, they hate dogs or something like that. If it's something where they're like, oh, I can't afford a pet, or I don't have the means to take care of it, and then like a month later they apply again, then we might say like, well, hey, what can we talk about? You know, last time you weren't able to take care of a pet. Can you tell me maybe what's changed? So it just goes back to the conversation and trying to help them make a match. If it turns out they're not ready, we like people to get there themselves and not actually have to deny them. But a lot of times people surrender and it's really hard, and it's for a good reason. And so I would rather try to find them another pet than deny them.
Can I also jump in? I'm just thinking as I'm, looking at the comments and thinking about animal welfare, animal well-being as a whole. It would be one thing if restrictive practices were working, but we're also talking about on these calls that animals are staying longer in the shelter, right? That we have an issue. So something isn't working. So I think that's why we need to look at it as well. People are not getting animals from us, or the majority of the community. We have the data on that, right? They go to their friends, they go to their family, they go to Craigslist. And so we have to think about that. How can we become the true source, and how can we really work with people where they are? And I also think about my own journey. I was just talking with a friend yesterday, and we both came into rescue, and I love cats. I love dogs too, but I freaking love cats. And when I first came into rescue, nobody was good enough. And I ended up with 12 cats in my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. This was a problem. And I had to go through a process and let go. And it was really hard. So, and now I'm like, anybody adopt, just adopt. But I also know when I need to get out of the way because my own stuff comes up. And I think recognizing that this is a power dynamic too, for so many reasons. Like, I get to decide whether or not you have an animal. It's kind of an awful structure. So how can we be more of a resource and really look at the bigger picture?
Allison, I just always learn from you literally every single day, and every opportunity I have to talk with you. And I just wanted to also just frame something else in this whole sense of community and meeting people where they are. Lindsay D, I also wanted to honor you for a second, right? I think it takes a lot of courage and bravery to be sharing things that maybe are going to be conversations that not everybody is aligned, right? And I think as we are shifting, I always want us to be mindful that even though not all of our conversations are yet rooted in data and evidence, a lot of the things that we do are based off of lived experiences that we've dealt with, right? So Lindsay, you've been in experiences where you have seen someone lie to you about the type of fence that they have. And I think when we are evolving, right, it's not coming from a place of judgment of where we've been in our practices, but where we should be to meet people where they are. And so I just wanted to say thank you for having the courage to speak up. I hope others will have the courage to speak up when you think even something might not be in alignment with what everybody else is thinking. But I think that's really how we get to where we want to be, right? Is honoring where we came from, understanding the reason why we should change, and then walking that path together. So thank you, Abbie.
Thank you, Bobby. You are the best. I mean, what a great, great thing to say. And I couldn't agree more. We're not going to get where we need to go by just having groupthink where people are afraid to jump in and voice an opinion or a thought that comes from their own experience. So I agree, and thank you, everyone who is having the courage to speak up and voice a different opinion in the chat. So the next question is about, there are a couple of questions that are around the same theme, which is basically, do I have to adopt every pet to every person? So the first one is, does open adoptions mean I have to adopt a cat to someone who's going to declaw that cat? And the similar question was, do I need to adopt a pet to someone who lives in extreme temperatures if they're going to keep that pet outside in an unsafe way? So I'd love for one of you to talk about, what does open adoptions mean in that sense? Does it actually mean that every person is entitled to every pet?
I'll just jump in real quick. I think it's centered around trying to find reasons to say yes rather than reasons to say no. And I mean, we're in Harlingen, Texas, so it's extreme temperatures all the time. It's hot all the time. And I mean, a lot of people from, whether it's the Southwest or whether it's the Northeast, I mean, those temperatures can be extreme all the time, right? So I think it's just case by case. So it doesn't mean saying yes all the time. It just means finding that fit. And you're not going to do it by answering a 12-page questionnaire and getting a DNA swab and checking their bank account. It's going to be just a conversation between two people. I think that's just how it works. And so, yeah, we've said no before. I mean, people tend to just reveal who they are really quickly if you have an honest conversation with them and you treat them with a little bit of respect. And I don't know how many times people have come in and I've overheard it just from like the cat room or my office or something, like, oh yeah, I want because I want a really strong dog so we can breed them and whatever. Whoa, wait a minute, thank you so much for talking to me. Let me tell you why that's terrible and why you should take one of our pets instead, that's altered, and so that's nothing even malicious happened there, right? This person's not one of us. They're not in animal welfare. They don't know anything about our movement or our mission, right? Because for so long people in our industry have done a really poor job of communicating it, right? And I think that's something we've addressed over the last few years. But I think that's the thing, right? I think it's just case by case, and you say no when you need to, or have that conversation in a non-judgmental way to get them to where your perspective is at, to see if that can make a shift. You activate them that way instead of just closing the doors for no reason.
And what about specifically the issue of declawing cats? That was posed a few different times in a few different ways.
For our shelter, it's a no. It's not going to happen. But we're in that position to where it's luckily we have RTF. We have outcomes that are much more rapid than having to wait and sit around for that perfect adopter to come around. So that's hard. When you're facing a situation, everything that we do, the world I come from in animal welfare is so often, at least in the old days, if that animal doesn't get out today, it's going to end up in the freezer, right? That's the way we were at a high intake animal shelter. We have to make those calls every day. Luckily, we're not in that position anymore because of CCP programs and increased outreach on social media. But I personally, for our shelter, we don't do that. If somebody expresses an interest in declawing a cat, we make sure to immediately point them in the direction of all the right resources to read up on it and why it's not the right way to go, and why they should explore other options if they have their own personal cat. Because we get approached not only to have those adopted cats declawed, but people think that we're a clinic sometimes and they want to do it here. And so we just use that as an opportunity to bridge that gap.
Thank you.
Hey, Abbie, can we just note in the chat that Anne, and thank you for bringing this up, to just really respectfully ask that we use barrier-free or conversation-based instead of open. So,
yes.
And I think the reason for, comparing that to child adoption. So I just really want to honor that.
Thank you. I missed that. And I think that's a really, it's an important point. And I apologize if I've upset anybody. I will make a concerted effort to use better, more inclusive language And I'm making a note to myself right now. Thank you. And thanks for calling attention to that, Allison. Speaking of conversational adoptions, the next question is really about how to have those conversations. Any tips on how to have conversations with people who love to give one-word answers? It's like pulling teeth to get them to open up.
I can take that. And I also wanted to say that I think there's this common misconception too, that conversation-based adoptions is just for municipal shelters. I've seen that argument a lot. Well, they have to let anyone adopt. They can't say no, but I'm a rescue and I have that right. And so I think this conversation, and thank you for anyone posing alternative views in the chat. I think it's really important that people are coming to the table. That's the start of this. I get a little more worried when people just shut it down completely, but if you're willing to have the conversation and listen and ask questions, I think that's really important. But so wanted to put that in there. And if anything, this might be more important for rescue organizations. But in terms of the one-word answers, I think looking at the process, I know it's easy to just think about the actual conversation when you get to that piece, but looking at the entire process as a whole. How welcoming is your environment? I've been to a lot of shelters where you're just sparked sort of instructions not to put your fingers in the kennels, and not a lot of people are smiling at you. It's more orders of where to go, and it's loud, it can be smelly, it's overwhelming. And so I think just setting up a more welcoming environment where people feel comfortable, that's really important. When you get to the conversation, prefacing it to be, this isn't a pass fail. The purpose of it isn't, at the end of this to see if you're, willing to or able to get a dog or cat or not, but it's more for us to find the best match for you. Like, that's the entire purpose of this. It's not to interrogate you. And then opening it up to those open-ended questions versus a yes, no, what would you do? Those hypothetical questions, I hate those, try to get rid of those. The ones like, what would you do if you had a $400 vet bill, or, all of those sort of hypothetical situations. So open-ended questions, really welcoming. And again, my favorite one is like, what can we help you with today? What are you wanting to know? And how can we set you up for success? And it's a good icebreaker. I think it just lets them, take the floor and really lead the conversation, and you're just supporting them.
These are great tips. I love the open-ended questions. Anyone else have tips?
I wanted to jump in and just, I think someone in the chat, I'm sorry, I don't remember who, said that they wouldn't pass their own questionnaire and their own application process. So I just think that's really interesting to reflect on. And I would even take it a step further to say, look at your own questionnaire and see if you ever would have passed it. Like, in the span of your lifetime, were there times where across the board, yes, at every moment in your life, you would have passed as a yes. I know I've been denied, and then the other thing is, I just want to go back to the power dynamic too. I was just traveling internationally and coming through immigration. I wasn't like smuggling anything. I didn't have anything on me. And I was so nervous. I was so nervous to answer the questions. I was so nervous to like, what was your purpose? It's the setup. There's a person in a uniform or in a position of power standing in front of me. And, my voice was shaking and I had nothing to hide. So just thinking about that, it's a scary dynamic and relationship to be in. And what is our ultimate goal, right? And then also that fear. So, even with the decline question, like, I don't know what's going to happen to this animal when it leaves my care. And that's the truth of it. We actually don't know. Even if we go to their house and we look and we, get all of the documentation, we actually don't know. And most of the time things are great. And the things that are horrible that happen, we aren't going to be able to prevent them, and probably don't happen as a result of adoption. But I think it's just getting really honest about that.
Excuse me. So sorry, I'm at the tail end of COVID over here. So speaking of that, how much follow-up do you do post-adoption? And what kind of follow-up do you do? That was another question directly from the last session.
I wanted to give a shout out to Maddie's pet assistant. So that's not really adopter follow-up, but it's a way to support adopters. So we have that through Shelter Love. So when they adopt, they'll get the link and they can set it up, and it's just like surveys. It lets you know when vaccines are due or when they might need a vet appointment. And I just see that as adopter support, but we don't actually go and follow up. Once they're adopted, that's that person's pet. They're no longer our pet. So we don't personally follow up, but we just do offer support things. Someone just put in the chat, we have the same thing. We have an alumni page on Facebook, and that just gives other support, or people can ask questions, or if they're struggling, a lot of times other adopters will chime in to help. And then we do have like an email address they can email if they feel like the app or the group isn't addressing things. So we do want that support for adopters, but again, we don't have the time or interest to have to go follow up ourselves. There's no way, I don't think any shelter can totally keep up with that if you want to do a higher volume.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one? All right. So it sounds like there's a difference between the sort of follow-up that is like, you know, are you adhering to the contract? Are you indeed the kind of adopter that I wanted you to be? And the kind of follow-up that's really just based in a true desire to support and answer any questions and help with education. If conversation-based adoptions means accepting that returns are okay, how do you make sure you have space for increased returns? What kind of safety net do you have in place?
Ooh, sorry, go ahead, Stephanie.
I was just going to say, if you're increasing your adoptions, that's the first step, right? Like we're moving animals through the shelter to begin with, and so that's one key to making sure that we have space available. I think that your returns are going to be much lower relative to the increase in adoptions and animals moving out of your space.
Allison, did you have something to add?
Sure. I was just going to make a plug for how interrelated everything is and looking at your capacity for care. And if you're working on the front side with keeping pets in homes and saying, is the shelter or is my rescue group the right place for this animal, or is it better off in its home? And how can I keep that pet in its home? Then you won't hopefully be inundated with animals. You'll have that space and that flexibility to be able to take in the animals that really need it the most.
Thank you. So I'm going to read a question directly that I took from the last chat, because I think this is really interesting and touches on, you know, is conversation-based adoptions for everyone, for every organization and every community. So this is from a shelter in California. And they said, we have an adoption process, which includes an application that is pass-fail. We have specific requirements that we look for only because our community is known for having a large overpopulation problem. And the main reason is the lack of information available to the public, which is something that we're working on. While we would like to be more open with our adoptions, our community has the largest kill status in animal control, and we are very careful who we adopt out to. With that being said, we're looking for other ways to look at our adoption process to increase our adoptions and grow. What would you tell this shelter about conversation-based adoptions not being possible in a very high kill community?
I would say that, first of all, in all the shelters that I've worked at, and I was part of the Massachusetts SPCA team that really kind of promoted this approach to adoptions back in the late 90s, starting in the late 90s. And they and every other large shelter that I know of that have started employing these conversation-based adoptions and trying to break down barriers has seen a corresponding decrease in euthanasia in their shelters. So other than just saying, we have the proof that it works, and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be, it's going to be messy when you first start it. But especially if you can pair it with accessibility to spay neuter services, that's another key, I think. But even in shelters that have done that without a real major push to provide open access to spay neuter services to everybody, they've seen that decrease in euthanasia. So, but you have to take that leap of faith that it's going to work.
And I'll jump in since it's a California shelter, and just to give a plug, we have a California for All Animals program, and actually a grant program. And we have a welcome grant that is, people still have a chance to apply by March 31st. Very simple application process. And I'll put the link in the chat. It's californiaforallanimals.com. So let's have a conversation. And I think maybe it feels daunting to do everything all at once, but I think it also starts with talking about the fears that are there, looking at it openly and honestly. Yeah, and you don't have to do it alone. And I'll also say, since my friend Javier is here, LA County did it. And I feel like if they can do it in California, any organization can.
Very true. I want to ask a follow-up. I've got a whole bunch of other questions, but I just want to ask a follow-up because, Allison, I heard you say it's daunting and it's hard to do everything at once. Where do you tell people to start?
Well, I think it's going to be different. I'll just try to share my own experience. We did a survey at LA County. We had restrictive policies around certain breeds of dogs. They had to go through, adopters had to go through interviews, and it was a pass-fail. And there was a long list of questions and home checks and talking to the landlords. So what we did is we actually did a survey of our staff to find out how they'd been trained, how they were going about the process, and to find out more information. And what we found was really eye-opening. First of all, there was no consistency in training. People learned like through the grapevine. How they were applying it also was all across the board. And the third thing was that the reasons they were giving were like gut feeling, just didn't seem right. So then it opened up a whole other conversation of like bias and things going on under the surface. So it gave us something to actually look at. But I think listening to the people who were doing the interviews just provided a whole wealth of information and a starting point for us, where we got to a place where we did a shift to conversation-based adoptions. But I guess don't be afraid to ask questions and really get down like what is actually going on and what purpose is it serving.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Sorry to throw that one at you, just off the cuff. But I knew you'd have a great answer for that. Here's another question from a shelter. The attitude here from many staff is financial commitment for vet care is important as a determiner for adopter suitability. How do you change the attitude that only high income adopters are acceptable?
Ask any of our staff if they can afford their pets, right? I mean, most people who work in animal welfare don't qualify as high income adopters, right? And we all find a way to provide for them. And yes, I'm seeing somebody else. Almost everyone isn't high income. Thank you, Stacy. And you don't have to have a lot of money to love your animal and for that animal to know the love of your home and the security of your home. Yes, there are expensive aspects to own, or can be expensive aspects to owning animals. But for the vast majority of animals, that doesn't come up. And that's the other thing that we have to remember, is that a lot of the dramatic things that we see in shelters represent a really small proportion of the owned animals out there and the owned animal experience. And so when we kind of focus on those worst case scenarios, or this really horrible thing that I saw one time 16 years ago, it kind of takes away and eats away at that trust that the vast majority of people deserve. And they deserve that opportunity to have that love and that companionship in their life.
Thank you. I think that's a great it's a great answer. It's a great concept to ask people to look at our own experiences, and why do we feel like we are the exception to the rule rather than the rule. I love this question. And Javier, you touched on this a little bit. How do you feel about placing animals with people who are unhoused? Any experience to share that would reassure our staff that this is okay and safe for the animals?
Javier, are you going to answer that? I would love to hear from Javier.
Yeah, Javier, please.
Wow. I don't think we've had anybody who's homeless to come adopt. We have had several homeless people come in to claim their animals. And we do have a COLA high with our department that waives fees, or if they're on general relief, it waives all the fees and they get their animals back. And at the same time, we provide them food if they need it, any type of, supplies that they may need. Our department also has a voucher program for medical needs. If they need assistance with that, it's for non-emergency because it does take a process, maybe 24 to 48 hours. So for non-emergency needs, we also provide services or anything that we can do at the care center. But as far as anybody, I've never had or experienced anybody who's homeless come in to adopt. But I mean, to claim their animals on a regular basis. Heck, even when I was assigned at Callison, we had a guy who literally broke in to get his dog, and we caught him at the gate. And he was like holding his dog, like ready to fight. And it's like, look, dude, we can help you. You can get your dog back for free. You don't got to go this way because he just got out of jail. And it's like, that's why we had his dog. It's like, do you want to go back? Like, we're not lying. We're here to help you, but don't do it this way. You know what I mean? Obviously, you want your dog wants to be with you. Don't go this route. We are here to help you. We can provide you. We got these programs. You will be fine. And after talking to him for a little bit, he gave the dog back. We took him in, and he got his dog back, and he went happy. He's like, I wish I would have known this. And it's like, I get it, but I go, don't go this route. Talk to us first next time. See what we can do for you. You know what I mean? And things will work out. But yeah.
Thank you for sharing that experience. You're wonderful. That is what a way to deal with the situation. You're such a role model for empathy. And I just would love to hear more stories from you. Does anybody here have a program that adopts to people who are unhoused?
I mean, the one thing that I can just share from my experience at the City of Sacramento's Front Street Animal Shelter is that, oftentimes our perception of someone being unhoused is just the way that they look, right? But we don't actually know people if they are unhoused or in transition or what their situation is. And most people that I have had an opportunity to work with that have been unhoused typically have some sort of mailing address. And so when people have come to adopt from us, that question never even comes up because the fact that there is some sort of mailing address, right? I think that's when we have that conversation is if they don't have an address, we have seen a lot of people that have used the local shelter as their home address as well. So I think even though you may not assume that you have, there's probably a lot of chances that you have adopted someone who is unhoused. So I think this is the perfect example of just meeting people where they are and treating every pet and person as an individual. And I just wanted to share some of that background from my experience at SAC.
Thank you, Bobby. How do you all deal with pressure? So we know that there can be some, in some communities, there's a tension between, maybe the rescue community and the shelter. And I've seen that really improve over the years in so many communities. But we did get a question about this. And the question is basically, how do you deal with pressure from, or fear of pressure from a very active and vocal, influential rescue community that sees the progressive movement toward conversation-based adoptions as dangerous to the animals? In other words, this shelter is saying, we'd really like to move toward conversation-based adoptions, but we're really afraid that it's going to cause backlash among the rescues in our community that might think we're not doing the right thing by the animals.
Data. My approach has been, and I still get it all the time, as a leader of a shelter, you get it all the time, that anger from rescue that does not believe in the approach that we're taking with conversation, with our community and engaging with it in a way that never worked before. Kind of like on a point that was touched before, the old way is proven to not save lives. This way has so far. And, during COVID, when it first happened, when I first started over here, the model that we had was not really as conversation based as it should have been. And we're still charging for adoptions, which is crazy. In South Texas, we just weren't, it didn't make sense. So cut fees, started conversations, and our adoptions doubled during COVID, and they've stayed steady since. And the return rate stayed the same as it did before COVID. And, I challenge these rescues all the time to just have a conversation with me. You know me, you know that you maybe not like my style, maybe don't like what I do or how I do it, but I mean, come on, if we're really here for the animals, then the data speaks for itself. And if we're really about saving lives and serving our community, show me a better way, please. If you have data that proves to me that I can be saving more animals, tell me and I will adopt it immediately. It's just like we have open conversations with adopters, I think we should have that with each other. And I think that's where it starts. Show me the data, and I hope to learn from you.
I also wanted to add that there are going to be some people you're not going to convince. There are some people that are just so, they just will not change their opinion. So I think it's also to know when to be like, okay, that conversation's not going anywhere, but where can I have conversations? And I think a lot about elected officials. I think getting messaging to them and strengthening how this is not only affecting the animals in our care or in shelters, but it's how it's affecting people in their communities, right? So people aren't able to get pets, people aren't able to afford veterinary care. Like, how is this making it really relatable and issues that an elected official will care about as well, and understanding the importance? So then you're bolstering support on that side, because you're always going to have at least a couple of people who will adamantly fight against what you're trying to do, no matter what.
Thank you. Last question from me, and that is, how do you conduct conversation-based adoptions when you're foster-based? This organization wanted to know how they get their fosters on board with being less restrictive.
So we are mainly foster based and went through this where we changed from having fosters do a lot of checks. So we did training with our fosters and basically explained why we want to switch to this model. We had actually stopped doing landlord checks a while back and hadn't like officially announced it. So then we actually had data to show that even though we stopped doing landlord checks 2 months ago, we haven't had one single return because of a landlord. We also showed them how like ways that we support adopters. And then the people who did have issues or occasionally would email and say, well, I don't like this person's zip code or whatever, had a one-on-one conversation with them and help them get there to explain why we can't judge people. And really, we were really worried about it. And our fosters really blew us away. We maybe had 2 people leave because of the policies. And you just kind of have to accept that there might be some people who won't get on board, but really, I think people got on board really quickly and it transitioned pretty easily. So I think just being there for your foster to answer questions, having good information for them, and they really took it and ran with it, and I was really impressed.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I love that. That's such a great example of the training. I've seen a lot of organizations where maybe the leadership or director of operations and executive director know what the best practices are and see the data and have access, but entire staff should have access to that. And then that expands even to your volunteer and your foster base. They should all have those. The supply and demand working group created a list of resources, so you have it all in one place. So I'll put that in the chat. But yeah, ongoing conversations. And I think it shouldn't just be once a year, but just, even if it's once a quarter, because you're going to be onboarding new fosters, and just leading by example. I've been to shelters and worked at shelters where that sort of behind closed door conversation, when someone walks in with maybe a tattoo on their neck, or what Bobby was saying, you're making a lot of assumptions based on appearance, or they look homeless, right? So stopping all those conversations, even if it's in the break room or behind a closed door, sort of whispering or texting each other, like that culture just has to go away. And expanding, make your staff, they're then advocates to the fosters, and just expanding that culture is not acceptable anymore, it's not the right thing to do. It's very discriminatory. And just setting that as a standard. So the more people you can get on your side on that and leading by example, it's really contagious. And just what Alisha said, I think you really increase your base of supporters, even if a couple end up leaving you. So I'll put that link in the chat if anybody wants access to those, the studies that have been done on this.
Thank you so much. I just want to call out before I pass it back to Bobby. Okay. I think what Stacey Danes just wrote in the chat really sums things up well. That this conversation is demonstrating to me how fearful we still are of people doing bad things. Most people are great, and I think that is such a wonderful attitude for us to come to our work every day with. And I want to thank everybody who spoke up today. I want to thank everyone who was on the panel, and I want to thank everybody on this call who is just doing the work of making conversation-based adoptions the way that things are moving toward. It benefits the animals, it benefits our community, it benefits all of us. So thank you, and thank you for continuing to educate me. I feel like I had a really important piece of education today on this call, just about the terminology that we're using. So I just love that I am learning constantly from you all. And I will hand it back to Bobby.
The amazing Abbie Moore. I'm just going to take this moment to thank you for your amazing facilitation on the tail end of COVID, and still showing up and showing out and calling in and holding yourself accountable in these conversations as well. I think for me, in closing, the best moments I've had in sheltering are when I got lost pets back home, when I was able to reunite families, when I was able to adopt out pets to families, when I was able to support families. And I think the thing that we have to remember about all of that, it all includes people. Right? Every part of those things includes people. And when you talk about what's the first step to busting these barriers, it's showing up to discussions like this. So I honor all of you. I honor all of our amazing panelists today. We'll see you next week. We're going to be talking a little bit about felines, and we're also going to have the Haas Wildlife Working Group sharing some great new resources. Happy Monday. Hope you all have a blessed week, and we'll see you in 7 days.